Hey gang, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the examples you found and some of the observations that everyone was making throughout the week. So sometimes the connections were direct and sometimes they were more indirect. And of course, conversations ebb and flow. So there's a few things I wanted to point it out. First of all, the violations of the Works Every Time layout. Each of you were able to find violations in your examples. And in the conversation, you began to hit on the idea that maybe the wet layout isn't the absolute goal, that there are valid times to violate a recommendation, because it's just that, a recommendation. We have found through research and practice that the Works Every Time layout is really good for helping get across message design. That said, if you are an advanced designer, you begin to recognize when you can violate components of the design or the layout, and maybe when you shouldn't, or when you should just scrap it completely and go with something completely different. But even if you go with something completely different, you can still find aspects of the wet layout. So I want you to think about what that means for design, that it's not strict and rigid. But if you're a novice designer or someone who's trying to improve their ideas of design, the wet layout can certainly help you in that respect. But then something else that came out was the role of colors. And this is taken in two ways. And you can actually see some examples of this on screen with two of the three that I pulled. And that is using colors to actually help in your deconstruction. So red and green or blue and green, different colors to indicate violations versus following the layout. Or in another example, using different colors to communicate different aspects, not necessarily good or bad, but what's related to spacing, what's related to fonts, those kinds of things. So just really quick, a number of you actually did use colors to help differentiate in your deconstruction. Jennifer, Doug, Leslie, Logan, Nicole, and Karen. If I missed anybody, I apologize, but those are the ones that I jotted down real quick when I was looking through at your screenshots that you embedded. But then the role of colors comes into play, and that is, how do the colors contribute to the message? And here I specifically want to point out the Domino's ad, which is not on screen, nor is the coffee example on screen. But these are really good examples of how colors contributed to the theme. So in Domino's, sticking with their red, white, and blue of their logo, the Domino logo. But then in the coffee, going with the neutral tan and brown tones and how that helped convey or evoke emotion. And we'll get to the psychology of color a little bit later in the semester, but I love to point out when you're touching on something that's relevant to class without necessarily realizing its role or importance. There's also an example, especially with the Pepsi ad you see on screen here, where we use a little to say a lot, that you don't have to have a lot of text, but it is our nature oftentimes to throw a lot of text. So when can you simply put a little and then refer them elsewhere for more information? And what are the design rules for that other medium? And then lastly, I want to talk about briefly when fonts interfere. There were at least one or two examples that came to mind. Some of you noticed when they were using too many fonts, so to speak. But then there's even one, I believe it's under Aaron's post with the band flyer for his friend's band. I included a link in my reply to a designer who's a DJ and puts together various event, concert, and band flyers as a side service of his business. And some of them are great examples of when too much really is just too much, and you can't get past all of the content and fonts and colors to actually see the message. So definitely something to check out. With that said, let's take a look at this week's topic.
Please use the links on screen to navigate to the section of the overview you wish to access.